Witness a woman's trip and tour through hysteria in a gothic horror setting in The Yellow Wallpaper. Written and directed by Kay Patuti, who did The North Passage. Also written and starring Alexandra Loreth, who stars as Jane. Jane, stop this crazy thing! Ironic, considering it is about hysteria. A woman going through hysteria at a summer home where her husband John feels this will do her some good, even though she has a problem with the yellow wallpaper in the room, and despite him being a doctor, he clearly just sees her as an experiment. He thinks he loves her, but he actually isn't projecting that at all. Spoilers will come up here in a little bit, but this is also based on the gothic novel by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. And I gotta say this much, had this been a stage play, this probably would have played a whole lot better. There were some good things in, as far as atmospheric shots and some good music, some jarring music. In fact, I think the whole point of the music was to anger and frustrate and possibly drive the viewer mad, as it was trying to be a throwback to the Hammer horror and Italian films. But unfortunately, what it ended up being was not very good. And that's not to say the effort wasn't there. That's not to say the performances were bad. I would actually argue that the performances did the best they could with the source material. And it's a basic movie that unfortunately is stretched the fuck out to an hour and 40 minutes, when probably 80 minutes would have done a whole lot better. Or maybe you could have just shortened this and made it part of a anthology horror movie. In fact, that probably would have played a whole lot better. I know it sounds like I'm dumping on this movie, and I kind of am, because I became a little bit more frustrated watching this. I get the point they were trying to make. It made sense, but it was also aggressively boring at times. And I'm sorry to say that, because I can appreciate what they were trying to do, but the plot, such as it is, this movie does come to us from Mutiny Pictures and Emerald Giant Productions. I guess Emerald Giant is what the Green Giant decided to be after he gave up green beans. Ho, 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 Emerald Giant. So, Jane is a woman suffering from hysteria in either the 18th or 19th century. I assume the 19th century, but I'm not entirely certain, because unless I just totally missed it, unless I just had some kind of, something come over my eyes and cloud my vision, I couldn't goddamn see when this took place. But that being said, Gothic horror can actually be pretty damn good. The opening narration indicates that Jane is not doing well. She's a mother, and she's there with her husband John. They're on a horse-drawn carriage, or in a horse-drawn carriage. It'd be pretty weird if they were on it, especially since they have a newborn kid. And to give you an idea that Jane ain't doing all that well, the kid's crying. John, instead of being a dad and saying, hey, I'll try to do something, you rest, he says, for God's sakes, Jane, could you do something? So the kid's crying, and what does she do? She looks at the kid, whoop, don't need that anymore, chucks it out the goddamn window. Okay, that's a bit of a jarring thing right off the bat. And then apparently the kid's okay. Somehow the kid's okay. Kid was in a blanket and apparently bounced around like a Super Ball and landed safely. It becomes increasingly obvious that Jane is not doing well, and John is away on work because he's a doctor, and there are a couple maids, caregivers, whatever it is, in this summer home that looks good but also has some problems. Apparently it's going to be dealt with in a court case. What court? I don't know, because I don't know exactly what fucking city they're in. I don't know what township they're in. I don't know what world they're in. They're somewhere on Earth. They could be on another planet for all I know. And given actually how some of the people tend to act a little bit later, while the performances certainly aren't bad, some people just decide to act like, like humans wouldn't actually act in a particular situation. It could be on another planet, alternate universe, or possibly on the Yellow Brick Road. Follow the Yellow Brick Road. Follow Yellow Wallpaper Road. Okay, enough of that. She doesn't like this one room with the yellow wallpaper. Apparently used to be some kind of nursery. She explores a garden, sees an old greenhouse that's literally built into a stone wall. She finds a bunch of tools. She finds this one particular gate that's locked to this one place that she can't figure out what it is. And she also hears from one of the help, Jean, I believe. I'm not entirely certain because the names are barely established, despite the fact that it's a small cast movie. She gets told a story about a composer who met a ghostly dancer and then kept composing, basically to keep her around everything. She was beautiful. She was everything he could have wanted. And then He kept playing, and then one time she had to go. She had to go. Her ghostly planet needed her. And he kept holding out to the last note and played the last note, and then she vanished. Her body had weakened, and she vanished. Her spectral body had weakened. Something, very, very weird stuff going on. And then, from there, we just get more hysteria and more music that just grates and grates and grates on you, which is probably the point, but unfortunately, it doesn't have this, oh, I, really hope this woman can get her help. Like, no, can this movie end, please? It's not really all that good. The idea's there. There's some nice atmospheric shots, and the performances are what they were, or, were what they were. They weren't terrible, but I didn't really feel drawn to necessarily care or invest in anybody. It was just, Jane, stop this crazy thing. Now, there's nothing wrong with having somebody write and also star in a movie because you can put some of yourself in the movie and make something good. This also kind of reminded me a bit of the star and writer of Soul Taker. If you've seen Soul Taker, don't get me wrong, the yellow wallpaper is infinitely better than Soul Taker because there's actual, smarts behind this. But that's kind of what it reminded me of. Like, Jane got featured a whole lot, and it got to the point where I really didn't care what happened to her character, even though it was obvious hysteria, all that, all this crazy stuff. Basically what it came down to. And yeah, it had a conclusion that should have been pretty damn obvious for everybody that had ever seen a movie or been outside for more than 5 minutes. So yeah, the movie's on Amazon if you want to check it out. It's not the biggest waste of time, but it's also not necessarily a movie that I'm going to revisit. Could it be on my worst movies of the year? No, but it will probably be on a list if I did disappointing movies because I had high hopes for it, and those hopes got dashed. Let's get into spoilers. The spoilers will literally not take very long. 3, 2, 1, spoilers. Okay, so she gets into hysteria. She finds out that story about the, the ghostly dancer, and then takes that, does some writing, and the husband warns, don't have her do any writing. Make sure she does her duties as a mother. Meanwhile, the help is taking care of the goddamn kid. She continues to hallucinate, do some more shit, get weaker and weaker and weaker, like the girl from the story that was told about. And let's give her more medications. Sure, more medications. That'll fucking help. That always fucking helps. We go over a period of May, June, July. Well, I think it's June, July, August. And we get to where it becomes obvious she's trying to peel the wallpaper and everything instead of doing the smart thing and just peeling it back. What does she do? She takes tools and chips away at it, and I'm chipping away at the little thing. This doesn't look like chipping at all. She's doing this. Pokey, pokey, pokey. You're only going to do that if you're going to paint. And also considering they were in a period where painting would have taken a lot more time because Sherman-Williams had not been invented yet. More in the pity. We see her doing some housekeeping stuff and a rotting smell coming from the walls and all this shit going on. Sniffing the cabinets and the walls for what's going on, as you do. There's a woman trapped in the walls that can see it all. Apparently. Something. Somehow. And then she ends up hanging herself. That's basically what the conclusion of the movie is. She ends up hanging herself because she gets in hysteria and her husband was not loving to her and she was nuts. And I'm not knocking that. If you feel like you have no other recourse, please reach out and help. Get help. Help is out there. You do have people that care about you. There are ways for you to make sure that nothing bad happens to you and that you continue to live on. Obviously, they intended to have some more stuff like as far as what led to her having this. She just felt completely worthless, and she had given in, the hysteria had just taken over, all the stuff had taken over, or it was a bad mental, health decline, and she felt she had no other recourse. Again, if you feel you have no other recourse, please reach out, there is help. The movie overall, though, just ends up being boring, and I didn't really care by the end of it. Even though it wasn't terrible, I've seen worse, it wasn't great. So I'm going to give it a D. I think this is the first D grade I've given. While I appreciate the atmosphere and the other stuff I mentioned, it was ultimately boring and kind of frustrating, and I didn't really care. So yeah, D. Agree, disagree, what I said, like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle in the description. I'm John Retlin. I'll see you soon.